we are given two or more arrays, and we would expect back a single array containing all the elements only once, in the original order that those original numbers first appeared. So, first thing I want to do is a bit of a cosmetic change here, but the concept, the spec here is that we get two or more arrays. So we don't actually know how many arrays are going to be that is going to be given to us. We get, in our specs, we only get up to, I believe we only get up to 3 arrays, but since they said 2 or more, I'm just going to get rid of all these parameters here, because in JavaScript, if you do not get the amount of formal parameters, if you get more arguments than the formal parameters you declare, those arguments are still available and they can be accessed with the arguments object. So saying that there are 3 formal parameters implies that there will always be 3 arrays given. That's not necessarily true, so I want to get rid of all of them. And instead I want to access them in the arguments object. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to declare our args, and I'm going to set it to array.slice.call arguments. This converts arguments, which is an array-like object, into an actual array. It makes the code a little more predictable, since we will be using arguments as an array here. So now that we have our arguments, we want to check through each array one at a time and add the values of each of those array arguments to one total array, and skipping over any element that we already have. So to do this, I'm actually going to abstract some of this logic. It definitely doesn't have to be done this way, but this is a little more leveraging the concept of higher order functions, so it's a nice thing to get used to. This will abstract away some of the logic we will be doing later on. We will declare an object, and I'm going to call it unique. This is the unique object, and it's going to have 2 properties. The first is ARR, or its array. This is going to be the array that will have only unique values. The second is a function, and I'm going to use the usual push function. Since this push function is on an object, this is not referring to the push method of an array. This will be called before JavaScript can ever find the push function, which it wouldn't anyway. But whenever there's a specific method that is done that is overriding another method on a prototype, this method, the one we declare, will be called first. So I'm going to call this push, and we're going to set it to a function which takes an item. And this item is going to push it to the uniques array only if it doesn't already contain that item. So to check that, we can use index of, our trusty index of. So this refers to its own object. I'm specifically calling it itself, so there won't be any confusion. It won't ever refer to a different property or a different variable that might be called ARR. So if unique.arr.index of, if it is equal to -1, in other words, if JavaScript can't find an index of the item, which we put in here, if JavaScript can't find the index of the item, then it's not in the array, and therefore the item is unique. So if that is true, we can push using unique.arr.push into that array. Now don't get confused here. There's push here and there's push here. This push is on the ARR method, or this push is on the ARR array. So this is accessing the array method push, while this here is accessing the unique objects method push. If that is confusing, you can always change this to add. I'm going to keep it pushed because it is mimicking the idea of pushing something onto an array, like here, so that's more readable for me. So now that we have this logic set up, we can easily start pushing values into this unique's inner array. All we have to do is iterate through all the different objects. So since it's an array of arrays, since we will be basically getting it like this because of our arguments array, which wraps around all these inner arguments, we're going to need to do 2 for loops. So for var I equals 0, I is less than args.length I plus plus. Now inside here, we will be getting each one of these smaller arrays. There's one, there's another, there's another. So for each of these, a given args of I would be something like this. And when using with inner arrays, I'll actually just make it the actual first argument of our test sample here. When doing arrays within arrays, it might be helpful to make a comment of that, so you can remember that args of I is actually indeed its own array and not just an index of a specific value. So we want to iterate inside each of these args of I, which is another array. We'll now do for var j equals 0, j less than args.length, and it's actually args of I.length. Because remember, just args would be this entire thing, which is not necessarily always the same as, say, this array. This inner one is a length of 4, the outer args is a length of 3. That will give us some undefineds later on. We don't want that. So j is less than args of I.length, j plus plus. And then this is the fun part. This is when we can just use unique dot push args of, and what is it args of? We have args of I, which then goes to here, so we get that back. So then we want to access this j index again, which will go from here to here to here each time. So that will give us a unique value within each of these arguments. And since we have an outer one, once it's done with this first here, it'll go to the second, and then we will iterate inside that through each one of these until we get to the end. We of course want to finally return unique.arr, since that is the property of this array that we have been modifying through here this whole time. Let's go ahead and test that. Looks like we have got to the choppa. I'm not going to try and do the voice for that. I hope that all makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't, and I will try to bring any confusion to light. Thanks for watching.